I'm not going anywhere. If you want to criticize my 16 years of service, please bring it on.
Well, in just hours, FBI Director Kash Patel is scheduled to face lawmakers again after a very contentious hearing yesterday. Several Democratic senators hammering him over firing decisions and falsely announcing the capture of a suspect in the Charlie Kirk case. Patel pushed back, at times getting into verbal shouting matches with lawmakers as he defended his record.
The Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues, we'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. Do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission.
Okay, so this just happened and we need to talk about it right now because this is absolutely explosive. Like career-ending explosive. Kash Patel, Trump's FBI director, just got hit with what legal experts are calling the most damning evidence they've ever seen in a perjury case. And when I say damning, I mean prosecutors literally had trembling hands when they presented it in court. That's not hyperbole. That's what observers in the courtroom are reporting. Prosecutors were so overwhelmed by how strong this evidence is, so confident about what they were about to reveal, that their hands were physically shaking as they handed documents to the judge. Think about what that means. These are experienced prosecutors, people who've handled major cases, people who've presented evidence hundreds of times. And this evidence was so devastating, so absolutely conclusive, that they couldn't hide their reaction. That tells you everything you need to know about what just happened to Kash Patel. His entire defense just collapsed. His sworn testimony just got exposed as lies. And his career is probably over. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Here's what went down. Patel has been testifying about the Epstein files and sealed court orders, right? He's been claiming he couldn't release documents because of legal restrictions, that his hands were tied, that he was following the law. But prosecutors just submitted new evidence, emails, memos, recorded communications that prove Patel was lying. That show he was in constant contact with Trump's legal team. That demonstrate he was receiving direct instructions about what to conceal and what to release. That exposed his claims of independent decision-making as complete fiction. And the judge looked at this evidence, confronted Patel directly, and said something absolutely devastating. The judge said, "Your testimony is plainly contradicted by the actual court orders. This is a textbook perjury scenario." Let me repeat that. A federal judge just told an FBI director that he committed textbook perjury. That's not a warning. That's not a suggestion. That's a judge stating a legal conclusion. That's a judge saying, "I've reviewed the evidence and you committed a crime." And then the judge signaled a referral for criminal investigation. Basically told prosecutors and Congress, this needs to be investigated by the Department of Justice. This needs to result in charges. This is too serious to ignore. That's about as damning as it gets in a federal courtroom. That's a judge taking off the gloves and going after someone who abused their position and lied under oath. And Patel's reaction? Reports from inside the courtroom describe him as visibly shaken, as someone whose entire demeanor changed when this evidence landed, as someone who realized in that moment that he's in serious, serious trouble. His defense team was described as being in chaos, scrambling, unable to offer any credible response to the evidence. Because what do you say when prosecutors have emails showing you did exactly what you testified you didn't do? What's your defense when there are recorded communications proving you lied? There isn't one. You can't spin your way out of documentary proof. You can't claim misunderstanding when the evidence is that clear. You're just caught. And Patel knows it. His lawyers know it. The judge knows it. Everyone in that courtroom knows it. This is over. The only question now is how severe the consequences will be. Will Patel be charged with perjury? Almost certainly. Will he be held in contempt? Probably. Will he lose his job as FBI director? That seems inevitable. Will he face prison time? That's the real question. And based on the strength of this evidence, based on a federal judge calling it textbook perjury, the answer might be yes. Patel might actually go to jail for lying under oath to protect Trump and his allies. And here's what makes this even more explosive. The evidence doesn't just show Patel lied. It shows he was taking orders from Trump's legal team, that he wasn't making independent decisions as FBI director, that he was functioning as an arm of Trump's political operation rather than as an independent law enforcement official. That's corruption at the highest level. That's abuse of office. That's exactly what people warned about when Patel was appointed. They said he would politicize the FBI, that he would use it to serve Trump's interests, that he wouldn't be independent. And now we have documentary proof that's exactly what happened. Emails showing coordination with Trump's lawyers, communications showing he was being directed on what to hide and what to release, evidence that the FBI director was taking political orders rather than following the law. That's a constitutional crisis. That's institutional corruption. That's the kind of thing that destroys public trust in law enforcement. And it all just got exposed in federal court with evidence so strong that prosecutors' hands were literally trembling. This is massive. This changes everything. And we're going to break down exactly what this means for Patel, for Trump, and for the entire investigation into what's been hidden in those Epstein files. All right, let's dig into the specifics because the details here are absolutely crucial to understanding how devastating this is. First, what exactly is this new evidence that prosecutors presented? From what we're hearing, it's a comprehensive package of documentary proof. We're talking about emails between Patel and Trump's legal team, internal FBI memos that show what Patel knew and when he knew it, recorded phone calls or video conferences where instructions were being given, digital communications that create a clear timeline of coordination and deception. And all of this evidence directly contradicts what Patel said under oath. When Patel testified that he was making independent decisions about the Epstein files, these emails show he was consulting with Trump's lawyers. When he claimed court orders prevented disclosure, internal memos show he knew there were exceptions. When he said he had no contact with the White House about what to release, recorded communications prove that was a lie. This isn't circumstantial evidence. This isn't he said, she said. This is hard proof. Documentary records that can't be disputed. Digital footprints that establish exactly what happened. And prosecutors presented it all at once, dumped it on the court and on Patel's defense team in a coordinated evidence drop that left no room for excuses or explanations. And the timing of this evidence presentation is interesting because prosecutors clearly had this material for a while. They didn't just stumble onto it yesterday. They've been building this case, gathering communications, analyzing records, putting together a comprehensive picture of Patel's conduct. And they waited until the right moment to present it. Waited until Patel had committed to his testimony under oath. Waited until he'd locked himself into false statements. Waited until they could present evidence that would be maximally damaging. That's smart prosecution. That's the kind of strategic thinking that wins cases, because now Patel can't walk back his testimony, can't claim he misspoke or misunderstood. He's on the record with sworn statements that this evidence directly contradicts. He's trapped, and prosecutors knew exactly what they were doing when they set that trap. Now, let's talk about what the evidence actually shows in terms of Patel's relationship with Trump's legal team, because this is where it gets really damning. The emails apparently show regular communication between Patel and Trump's lawyers. Discussions about what documents to release and what to withhold, conversations about how to handle congressional requests, coordination on messaging and legal strategy. And this communication wasn't Patel asking for legal advice as FBI director. This was Patel taking instructions as a political operative. The emails show Trump's lawyers telling Patel what to do, and Patel responding that he would comply, that he would find legal justifications for the decisions they wanted, that he would stonewall and delay as requested. That's not how the FBI is supposed to work. The FBI director is supposed to be independent, supposed to make decisions based on law and evidence, not political considerations, supposed to resist White House pressure when it conflicts with proper law enforcement. But these emails show Patel was doing the opposite, was subordinating the Bureau to Trump's political interests, was using his position to help Trump and hurt Trump's enemies. That's exactly the kind of corruption that destroys institutions. That undermines rule of law. That turns law enforcement into a political weapon. And we now have documentary proof that's what was happening. The recorded communications are apparently even worse, because in email, people at least try to be somewhat careful with their language. They use euphemisms. They avoid being too explicit, but in phone calls or video conferences, people are more candid, more direct. more willing to say what they really mean. And apparently these recordings capture exactly that. They capture Trump's lawyers explicitly telling Patel what to hide. They capture Patel acknowledging that the legal justifications are weak, but saying he'll try to make them work anyway. They capture discussions of political strategy rather than law enforcement strategy. And they capture Patel fully aware that what he's doing is improper, but doing it anyway because of loyalty to Trump. That's the kind of evidence that destroys any possible defense, because you can't claim innocence when you're on tape discussing the improper conduct. You can't claim you didn't understand when the recordings show you knew exactly what you were doing. You're just caught, completely and totally caught. The internal FBI memos add another layer to this because they show that people inside the Bureau knew what was happening. Career FBI officials were raising concerns, writing memos for the record, documenting that Patel was making politically motivated decisions, trying to create a paper trail that would protect them when this inevitably blew up. And those memos prove that Patel's conduct wasn't just improper, and it was so obviously improper that other FBI officials felt compelled to document it, that people inside the Bureau were alarmed enough to create records that could be used against him later. That's devastating from a credibility standpoint, because it shows Patel wasn't operating in some gray area where reasonable people could disagree. He was so far over the line that career professionals were writing warning memos. Now, when this evidence was presented in court, the reaction was apparently immediate and dramatic. The judge took time to review the documents, then looked directly at Patel and started asking pointed questions. Questions that Patel couldn't answer without further incriminating himself. Questions designed to give him a chance to explain, but that only made things worse when he couldn't provide credible explanations. And then the judge made that devastating statement. Your testimony is plainly contradicted by the actual court orders. This is a textbook perjury scenario. That's a judge not just questioning witness credibility. That's a judge making a finding of fact. That's a judge saying, I've reviewed the evidence and I'm convinced you lied under oath. That's the kind of statement that prosecutors can cite when they bring perjury charges. That's the kind of judicial finding that makes conviction much more likely, because juries give weight to what judges say. If a judge has already found that testimony was false, that heavily influences how a jury views the case. And the judge didn't stop there. The judge also issued immediate orders for full disclosure of key documents. Basically said, we're done playing games. You're going to release the Epstein files and any other documents you've been withholding. You're going to comply with the law. And if you don't, there will be immediate contempt proceedings. That's a judge drawing a hard line, saying, I've had enough of this obstruction. I've had enough of these lies. We're going to enforce the law whether you like it or not. And that order has huge implications because it means the documents are coming out. Whatever Patel was trying to hide is going to be exposed. Whatever politically sensitive information he was protecting is going to become public. And that's probably terrifying to Trump and his inner circle. Because if Patel was willing to commit perjury to keep these documents hidden, they must contain something really damaging, must implicate powerful people in serious wrongdoing, must be the kind of information that changes political calculations and opens up new investigations. So we're not just looking at Patel facing perjury charges, we're looking at a disclosure of documents that could create massive new scandals and legal problems for Trump and his associates. Legal experts and congressional figures who are following this case are saying Patel's collapse makes further DOJ scrutiny and possible indictments all but certain. That's not speculation. That's people with decades of legal experience looking at this evidence and saying, yeah, charges are coming. Indictments are inevitable. This is too clear-cut for prosecutors to ignore, too serious for the DOJ to sweep under the rug. Even a politicized Justice Department would have trouble declining to prosecute when a federal judge has called it textbook perjury. When the evidence is this overwhelming, when the conduct is this egregious, and that assessment is based on the strength of the evidence. Because what makes perjury cases difficult to prosecute is usually that you need to prove someone knowingly lied, that they weren't just mistaken or confused, that they had intent to deceive. But when you have emails and recordings showing coordination and planning, intent is easy to prove. When you have internal memos showing the person knew the truth, you can prove they knowingly lied. When you have documentary evidence that directly contradicts sworn testimony, you have everything you need for a perjury conviction. So prosecutors looking at this evidence are seeing a slam dunk case, an easy prosecution that they're almost certain to win. And that makes charging decisions much simpler, because prosecutors generally don't bring charges unless they're confident of conviction. They don't want to lose high-profile cases. But when the evidence is this strong, when a federal judge has already made findings, when the documentary record is this clear, prosecutors feel confident moving forward. They know they can win, and they know the public expects them to act when the evidence is this compelling. Now, the description of Patel being visibly shaken in court is significant because it shows he understands the gravity of his situation, that he knows he's facing potential prison time, that the legal shield of being FBI director isn't going to protect him from criminal prosecution. People who are confident in their innocence don't look visibly shaken when evidence is presented. They look calm. They look ready to explain and defend. But people who know they're caught look shaken, look panicked, look like they're trying to figure out how bad this is going to be. And that was apparently Patel's demeanor, which tells us he knows exactly how much trouble he's in. That his lawyers have probably told him the evidence is devastating, that he's likely looking at criminal charges and potential prison time. And that realization, that moment of understanding that your life is about to change dramatically for the worse, that's what creates that visible reaction. His defense team being in chaos makes sense too, because what do you do when overwhelming evidence contradicts your client's testimony? Your options are extremely limited. You can try to argue the evidence is inadmissible or was obtained improperly. But if it's emails and internal records, that's usually not going to work. Those are routine business records. You can try to argue the evidence is being misinterpreted. But when it directly contradicts sworn testimony, that's a tough sell. You can try to negotiate a plea deal, try to get reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. But that means admitting guilt and potentially testifying against others. Or you can go to trial and hope for a miracle, hope the jury doesn't believe the evidence. But with documentary proof this strong, that's a losing strategy. So Patel's lawyers are probably having very difficult conversations with him right now, explaining that his options are all bad, that the best outcome might be a plea deal that involves some prison time, but less than he'd get if convicted at trial, that he needs to start thinking about protecting himself rather than protecting Trump. And those conversations are probably getting heated because Patel's entire identity has been built around loyalty to Trump, around being Trump's fighter, around defending Trump no matter what. And now he's being told that continuing that loyalty is going to result in years in prison, that he needs to start thinking about his own future rather than Trump's political interests. That's a hard message to hear. That creates internal conflict and panic. And that's apparently what's happening with Patel right now. Okay, so let's break down what happens next and what this means for everyone involved. First, the immediate legal consequences for Kash Patel. He's now virtually certain to face a DOJ investigation for perjury. That investigation will review all the evidence presented in court. We'll interview witnesses. We'll build a prosecutable case. And based on what we've seen, that case will be strong. Prosecutors will have emails showing coordination with Trump's legal team. We'll have recordings capturing improper discussions. We'll have internal memos documenting concerns about Patel's conduct. And they'll have a federal judge's finding that this is textbook perjury. That's more than enough to bring charges. That's more than enough to get a conviction. So Patel's probably going to be indicted, probably going to face criminal trial, and probably going to be convicted unless he takes a plea deal. That's the trajectory he's on now. And that means his career as FBI director is over. Even if he tries to hang on, even if Trump tries to protect him, you can't continue serving as FBI director while under indictment for perjury. The political pressure would be too intense. The institutional damage would be too severe. Congress would demand his resignation. The FBI's own agents would be demoralized. So Patel is going to have to step down, either voluntarily or by being forced out. And that resignation is going to happen soon, within weeks probably, because the evidence is already public. The judge has already made findings. The wheels are already in motion. Second, the disclosure of the documents Patel was hiding, because the judge ordered full disclosure, ordered release of the Epstein files and related materials, and that order has to be complied with. So we're going to see those documents. We're going to find out what Patel was so desperate to keep hidden, and whatever's in there is going to be explosive. Has to be, because people don't commit perjury over nothing. They don't risk their careers and freedom to hide information that doesn't matter. So these documents probably implicate powerful people, probably contain evidence of serious wrongdoing, probably open up new investigations and scandals. And when they come out, when journalists and congressional investigators start digging through them, we're going to see fallout that goes way beyond Patel. We're going to see other people implicated, other cover-ups exposed, other lies revealed. This document disclosure could be the domino that starts a cascade of accountability. Third, the implications for Trump and his legal team, because the evidence shows they were directing Patel, shows they were coordinating with him on what to hide and what to release, shows they were using the FBI for political purposes. And that's potentially criminal. Obstruction of justice, abuse of power, corruption of law enforcement. If Trump's lawyers were directing the FBI director to withhold documents or lie about legal requirements, they could face charges too. They could be investigated for obstruction and conspiracy. And that puts enormous pressure on Patel to cooperate, because prosecutors are going to offer him a deal. They're going to say, you're going down for perjury. That's certain. But if you cooperate, if you provide information about who directed you to do this, if you testify about Trump's involvement, we can recommend reduced sentencing. We can get you less prison time. That's a powerful incentive. That's the kind of offer that makes people flip. And if Patel takes that deal, if he starts cooperating, Trump is in serious trouble, because Patel knows everything, knows what discussions happened, knows what Trump knew and when he knew it, knows what orders were given. And if he testifies to all of that, if he provides that information to prosecutors, Trump could face charges too, could face investigation for directing the obstruction, could face the consequences of having politicized the FBI. Fourth, the political fallout heading into the 2026 midterms, because this story is going to dominate headlines. FBI director caught lying under oath. Overwhelming evidence of coordination with Trump's lawyers, federal judge calling it textbook perjury, documents about to be disclosed that were being hidden through criminal conduct. That's the kind of scandal that defines elections. Democratic candidates are going to make this central to their campaigns. They're going to say, look at the corruption, look at how Trump's appointees abuse their power, look at what they're willing to do to protect Trump and hide the truth. And that message is going to resonate with voters, especially independent voters who care about rule of law and institutional integrity. They're going to look at this evidence at Patel being caught so blatantly and think, this is exactly what people warned about. This is what happens when you put loyalists in positions of power. This is corruption at the highest levels. And that perception shift could be decisive in close races, could determine control of Congress, could shape Trump's ability to govern for the rest of his term. Republican candidates are going to have a really hard time defending this, because the evidence is too clear. The judge's findings are too damning. They can't just dismiss it as political persecution when there are emails and recordings proving the conduct. So they're going to have to either condemn Patel and distance themselves from Trump, or try to defend the indefensible and hope their base sticks with them. Neither option is good. Both create political vulnerability. Fifth, the impact on the FBI as an institution, because this scandal confirms people's worst fears about what happens when the Bureau is politicized, when an FBI director is chosen for loyalty rather than independence, when law enforcement is subordinated to political interests. And that confirmation is going to damage the FBI's credibility for years. People are going to question whether the Bureau can be trusted, whether its investigations are legitimate or politically motivated, whether justice is being applied fairly or being weaponized against political opponents. And rebuilding that trust is going to take a long time, is going to require fundamental reforms, is going to need leadership that's demonstrably independent and nonpartisan. The next FBI director is going to have to spend years proving that the Bureau can function properly, that it won't be a political tool, that it will investigate crimes regardless of political connections. That's a heavy burden. That's the institutional cost of Patel's corruption and Trump's politicization. Sixth, the possibility of more revelations as the investigation continues. Because once prosecutors start pulling threads, once they have evidence of one crime, they often find evidence of others. The emails that prove Patel lied might also show other improper conduct. The recordings might capture discussions of other cover-ups. The internal FBI memos might document other instances of politicization and abuse. So this investigation could expand, could encompass more people and more misconduct, could reveal a pattern of behavior that goes well beyond just the Epstein files. And as that evidence comes out, as more people get implicated, as the scope of the corruption becomes clear, the political and legal consequences multiply. More charges, more defendants, more scandals, more pressure on Trump and his administration. This could be the beginning of something much larger than just one FBI director lying under oath. Seventh, the historical significance of this moment. Because we're watching the rule of law being enforced against one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. We're watching prosecutors present overwhelming evidence of perjury. We're watching a federal judge make findings of criminal conduct. We're watching accountability mechanisms work, despite political pressure to protect Trump's allies. And that matters enormously, because it shows the system can still function. That evidence still matters. That documentary proof can overcome political loyalty, that judges and prosecutors can still do their jobs when someone breaks the law, regardless of who that person is connected to. That's encouraging for anyone who worries about American democracy, for anyone who fears that institutions are being captured and corrupted beyond repair. This case shows there's still resistance, still people willing to enforce the law, still mechanisms that can hold powerful people accountable, and that's what we need to preserve democracy. That's what prevents the slide into authoritarianism, the willingness to follow evidence where it leads, the courage to charge the powerful when they commit crimes, the institutional strength to withstand political pressure. So as bad as this scandal is, as damaging as Patel's conduct has been, the response to it is reassuring. The system is working, the checks are checking, the balances are balancing, and justice might actually be served. That's not guaranteed. Patel could still avoid charges through political interference. Trump could still protect him. The DOJ could still decline to prosecute. But based on what we've seen, based on how strong this evidence is, based on a federal judge calling it textbook perjury, accountability seems likely, consequences seem probable, and that gives hope that the rule of law still means something in America. So where does this leave us? With an FBI director caught in overwhelming lies, with prosecutors holding trembling evidence that proves perjury, with a federal judge making devastating findings, with document disclosure coming that could expose even more wrongdoing, with a DOJ investigation virtually certain, with charges likely, with Trump's inner circle panicking, with the 2026 midterms being shaped by this scandal, with institutions being tested and, at least in this case, responding appropriately. This story is still developing. The investigation is ongoing. More evidence will likely emerge. More people might be implicated. More charges might be filed. And we're going to cover every single development because this is about more than one corrupt official. This is about whether our system of government can handle corruption at the highest levels, whether evidence and law can overcome political power, whether accountability is still possible when the powerful break the rules. Those are fundamental questions about the nature of American democracy, and we're getting answers to them right now, in real time, through this case and others like it. So stay tuned, keep watching, keep paying attention, because what happens with Kash Patel matters. What happens with this overwhelming evidence matters. What happens when the powerful are caught lying matters. It determines the kind of country we live in, the kind of government we have, the kind of future we're building. And right now, in this moment, those outcomes are being decided. The choices being made by prosecutors, judges, and political leaders will echo for years or decades, will set precedents that affect how power is wielded and constrained, will determine whether we remain a nation of laws or become something else. That's the stakes. That's why this matters. That's why we need to pay attention to every development in this case. Because the future of American democracy might just depend on whether Kash Patel faces consequences for his lies.